Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I am Jenna Poxtus, Vice President and General Manager for our Networked Information Solutions Division at Northrop Grumman, and it is truly a privilege for us to support this forum on transforming for the future fight. I'd also like to say that we really appreciate what the Association of the United States Army does for our U.S. Army by educating, informing, and making connections, as we clearly see happening here across the entire conference, almost so much so today that not everyone could get in this morning. We are proud partners of the Association of the United States Army, which provides forums like this one throughout the year to inform and engage audiences in the U.S. Army community and beyond. AUSA amplifies the U.S. Army's voice, and it is clearly achieving its mission of voice for the Army, support for the soldier. Now for the topic at hand, and while we have all packed in this room, which is wonderful to see, transforming for the future fight. As the saying goes, what got us here won't get us there. While there are abundant lessons to be learned from the past, the rapid pace of technological change means that every potential conflict brings previously unseen challenges. I know many of us, especially today, are thinking of our allies around the world and the challenges they face. The need for transformation and evolution is only accelerating. We see it growing today, and we appreciate that our distinguished panel will be providing their perspectives on the focus of that transformation for the U.S. Army. It's not only that the U.S. Army must transform, so must industry partners. Building on modular, open system architectures, agile development, digital transformation, and AI, we are becoming more adept at delivering solutions on shorter timelines. But we have to keep pushing to help achieve that vision. As we know, that pace of change will only continue to accelerate. From an industry perspective, we need strong partnerships and strong solutions that can continually adapt quickly to those changing mission needs. In my own work with the Army, I am seeing this take place, and I look forward to what comes next. I'm also looking forward to hearing from our panel as they address those challenges as well as the opportunities of U.S. Army transformation. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us and being part of this important discussion today. And now I'd like to turn things over to our moderator for this session, General Hicks, Managing Partner, Next Horizon Partners, LLC. It is my privilege and honor to introduce General Hicks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. I'm Bill Hicks, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon for what is obviously an important panel given the standing room only crowd we have. I'm pleased to welcome the Honorable Doug Bush, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisitions, Science, Technology, and Logistics, General Jim Rainey, Commanding General, U.S. Army Futures Command, and Mr. Farhat Hizan, President of General Dynamics Ordnance and Tactical Systems. Thank you all for participating. Each panel member will provide a few minutes of initial comments, followed by a roundtable discussion, and then questions from the audience. As I turn the mic over to our panel, it's worth recalling the sage counsel of General Don Story, the architect of the Army's last transformation, that it must be the role of technology to provide weapon systems which render ineffective the costly investment of our foes, not simply to try to match something the other fellow has just fielded. With new weapons, we should seek new dimensions of combat. I'm sure the panel that we have here today will explore that issue and many others. Secretary Bush.
Sure, and thanks for the introduction, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and it's great to be here. The I will point out the title of this panel this year is different, and that's thanks to General Rainey. So the focus on transforming, not just modernizing, and he'll talk about that, is absolutely vital. That's, equipment by itself does not transform the Army. We have to have the trained soldiers and everything else that goes with creating units that go to combat is necessary. So I think transforming is absolutely the right word. But I will talk today about a few things about the acquisition aspect of the larger effort of transforming. First, really want to just highlight a few of our many successes in the past year since I was here. So it's been a big year. So to name a few, AMPV, and sorry, there's going to be acronyms. I assume this is an acronym-friendly crowd. AMPV, full rate production. M10 Booker, low rate production. Integrated Battle Command System, full rate production. Multi-year contract award for Apache. Multi-year contract award for Black Hawk. Down select for future long-range assault aircraft. Down selected 2 vendors for the XM30 program, our Bradley replacement. Initial production of our new rifle, the XM7, and automatic rifle, the XM250. And in addition, just as important in a lot of ways, software. We rolled out our Integrated Personnel and Pay System, Army, IPSA, successfully this past year. So a lot happening, a lot of targets getting knocked down by the Army team. And it's not just acquisition. So getting all of those done require the whole team, in particular General Rainey's folks at Army Futures Command working closely with my PEOs, but also Army Materiel Command, who we do everything with to support and sustain our forces. So it's been a great year and a great team effort, and just a ton of progress across the board, achieving the Chief and Secretary's priority to just keep modernizing as part of transforming, and to do it on a time scale that's relevant to the world we live in. So I could talk more in Q&A about speed, but that's been my #1 thing since I got there, and my team and the whole Army is embracing that with vigor. The second thing we've done in the last year, of course, has been supporting our ally, Ukraine. So the U.S. Army gets the tough missions. We got this one. And the whole Army team, again, is doing amazing work. On the equipping side, we've moved out, providing Ukraine thousands of missiles, millions of artillery shells, hundreds of armored vehicles, with more coming every day. In terms of funding, that's required the Army to get on contract close to $25 billion in less than a year, actually, of funding to replace equipment that we've sent or foreign military sales for Ukraine. So that contracting and that acquisition effort on top of the Army doing everything I started with, it's been a big year. But working with our great industry partners, we are responding. America, the arsenal of democracy, we're here. We're still the arsenal. We have to do it. We are leading, and we are leading the whole free world in this effort. And American business, when given the resources they need, this is where the ingenuity of the American people, the initiative, the ideas, free people in a free market, free country are going to outperform anyone we go up against. And you're seeing that right now with those results. So really, in terms of transforming overall the Ukraine effort and then the Army effort underlying it, I'll just leave you with a couple thoughts on how we're doing this. One is, thanks to Congress, new authorities that are letting us go faster. That's a leap of faith to some degree from Congress, but Congress has been willing to give us this added flexibility and responsibility, and I think we have been using it in the Army aggressively, but also responsibly. So, because oversight still matters. It's the American people's money. It's not, no offense to venture capital, but it's not venture capital money. It's the American people's money. So we have to be good stewards of that, and we are doing that. The second thing is inside the Pentagon and the Army. So the requirements effort to get these programs started and set in the right way, but then also keep them going and adjust them when we have to, has been another huge success story. And that started before I arrived, but it's been carried forward through General Murray's work all the way to General Rainey's work to keep the requirement system working faster, better, more flexible. That's allowed us to stay in sync with them and adjust where we need to when we run into a challenge. And then finally, continued support from Congress has been absolutely critical. So the last couple budgets, that I've worked on, very strong support. The one before those, also strong support. And of course, the funding for Ukraine I mentioned, all that, and our entire ramp up of production to support Ukraine also require Congress. It all comes back to members making judgments to give us, the people's money, to do the nation's business. And Congress has been extremely supportive, and I hope that continues. And that partnership has been really effective as well. So happy to get to Q&A, but just a few thoughts there to start us off.
Yeah, thank you very much. General Rainey.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks. As Mr. Bush said, transformation. AFC exists to transform the Army. That's our purpose. That's the expanded mission that Secretary Wormuth gave us a little over a year ago. Our new Chief, General George, has established 4 priority areas that I'm sure he'll talk about, but continuous transformation is one of those, and that's the AFC responsibility. I say that, but there's no way AFC could do that by itself. Obviously, it starts with partnerships across the ACOM, so General Brito, General Hamilton at AMC and the facilities business. General Pappas owns, and the combatant, our theater army commanders own all the operating force. That's who gets to grade our transformation work. Of course, a great relationship with Honorable Bush and his teammates, but also the Joint Force and also all our partners and allies. So it's going to take the whole team to transform the Army, to make sure we're the dominant land force at any point in the continuum of time. Modernization is a big part of that, obviously. So for our industry partners, I'll just make a few comments about that. And I think about it really in 3 distinct periods of time that are hopelessly interrelated, interdependent. So deliberate modernization, think signature modernization efforts. I believe the Army is doing very well. We've dramatically reduced timelines, as Mr. Bush mentioned. We've been consistent we haven't moved the goalposts around. We've been consistent for 5 years on what our priorities are. And our hard-working PEOs and PMs are delivering. And they're retaining the confidence of both Congress and the operating force, which is probably the single biggest reason. And credit to my predecessor, General Mike Murray, and the CFTs, but one thing they did when they stood up AFC is they put the hard work in to get the requirements about right. So we haven't had a lot of requirement creep and moving around. So a lot of reasons. Deliberate modernization, I think, is on track. We were not taking our eyes off that by any means, but because that is going well, it's created some other opportunities, one of which is inside about 2 years, so 18 to 24 months. That we're at the most disruptive period of time in terms of technology. There's a war going on in Ukraine. A war started 3 days ago. We have a duty to be able to see what's happening, learn from that, and rapidly turn those observations into real capability in our formations. So I'm not talking about combat development fast, but the ability to see something that exists, rapidly acquire it, and inject that into our formations in a way that it turns into real capability. Can't go so fast you end up with leaders and soldiers who don't know how to fight it, but we can go a lot faster. So we got inside 2 years and then going beyond 30. There's fundamental changes to warfare coming that I can talk about if anybody's interested. I've talked about, but there are some big dramatic changes coming to the future, and the time to act on that is now. I say 2040 in some audiences, and you can see people's like mental screensavers just kick on, they power down. But to have something in 2040, it needs to be fielded full up by about 35, which means it needs to be low rate or prototype by 30, and we're working on our budget to 29 right now, today. So 2040 is going to be on us like that. The time to do something about that is in the next 18 to 24 months, so I'm real excited about that. 2 major efforts our secretary mentioned this morning: human-machine integrated formation. So how do we take the right combinations of humans and machines and optimize both of them for the things that they're uniquely best at? That's important because that's relevant in all three of those periods of time. We absolutely should be doing it right now. We have real versions of our first prototype platoons, one at NTC, one at Fort Moore, that are actually in the dirt. This isn't PowerPoint stuff. We're going not reckless fast, but tempo fast on those. Think big, start small, go fast, as the great Gus Perna used to say and teach us all the time. But it's also, imagine that out in the future is fully scaled across all types of formations, where we're optimizing the capabilities of technology and turning technology into an instrument of national power like we have the capability to do here in the United States. And the other one is a command and control warfighting system. Some people refer to the network. I like to remind people the only reason we have a network is so commanders can do command and control and staffs can control stuff. So we got to do better than what we have right now, today, in case we go to war tonight. We got to work on it. But more importantly, the opportunities that exist in the future with things like AI, machine learning, large language models, quantum computing, we're not going to be able to fully realize the potential of that unless we move to a truly data-centric approach to the command and control warfighting system. If people ask me what's my biggest concern, it always comes back to the ability to execute the command and control warfighting system by commanders who can make more decisions, better decisions, faster decisions. If we can't do that, fires aren't going to matter, protection's not going to matter, maneuver's not going to matter. So those two big things across those three continuum of time in order to transform the United States Army with our joint and partner teammates is what AFC is all about lately. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Mr. Giesen?
Good afternoon. First of all, let me say it's an absolute honor to be up here on the stage on this panel with our two distinguished Army leaders, Honorable Bush and General Rennie. Thank you very much for the invitation. So a little bit about the business I run to give you some perspective on how I'll be addressing some of the questions later. So we are the munitions weapons arm of General Dynamics. Very diverse portfolio. At the center of it is conventional munitions, direct fire and indirect fire. When you look at the direct fire side of the house, we're one of two leaders in that marketplace, sharing it with Northrop Grumman. And on the indirect fire, artillery and mortars, we are the main players really in all things artillery, and we're a big part of the ramp up going on right now in artillery for Ukraine. We also have a missile subsystem segment. We're not a missile prime, but we do support all the missile primes with a variety of subsystems. And then we have a weapons business which includes our Gatling gun and then our newest product offering, Iron Fist active protection systems. So as you would imagine, with a diverse portfolio such as ours, we've been actively involved with Army modernization priorities since its inception back in 2017. We've been actually working on more than a dozen projects and touching 5 out of 6 of the CFTs. And I'll say, looking what the portfolio was about 5 years ago and what it's going to be 5 years from now when it comes to munitions, we're absolutely transforming for the future fight. So one thing I would like to talk about at the opening, which is pretty consistent with everybody said, they started with partnership. When I want to talk about how communication is key to being aligned together and for that partnership so we can go ahead and have joint success. And whether that joint success is ramping up like we're doing in the Ukraine, dealing in low budget times, or what we're talking about today, getting next-gen capabilities to the warfighter rapidly. Communication for us, we need two things. We need it to be transparent, clear and open communication, and then we also need it to be timely, and sometimes that means frequent. With the Ukraine ramp up, we were talking almost on a daily basis with our PEO customer. When we're talking about alignment and partnership, it's not company A talking with a part of the Army, it's really all the stakeholders, and it really starts with the alignment in the Army, and it's really great to see the alignment we have on the stage between AFC and ASALT. I lost my train of thought for a second there. So examples of great partnership and alignment. One is the Ukraine ramp up. Not only are we increasing capacity 6-fold, we're also introducing modernized technology, having a much better, healthier industrial base after. We're also doing it in record speed. Years have been shed off the original schedule. We're eliminating single points of failures. But modernization is also another great area or an example of partnership. Because since its inception back in 2017, there's been clear and consistent messaging on these priorities. They've actually deconflicted our development priorities, not just within industry, but also within the Army as well, which has increased our confidence level to make investments. Of course, we hear from the Army customer all the time, industry making more investments. It's what we want to do. We're in the business of making investments, growing the business. We just have to have a reasonable return, and we have to have a high likelihood of success. Because of this consistent communication between these two parties, we've actually doubled our R&D budgets in just 2 years. So by 2019, we doubled our R&D budgets, and we actually increased our engineering talent by 200%, and it's remained at that level ever since. So it's really a win-win partnership on that front. Other thing I want to talk about also is workforce. We're in ramp-up mode. At times, we have to attract people to come into the defense industrial base. So how do we attract people to decide to come work in this industry? I think there's 3 things you need to think about. First of all, does that employee have a shared vision or mission with the company or the industry? And I think across the board, we have a competitive advantage. Those that choose to work in the defense industrial base do have that shared mission. They're very proud for the work they do for the warfighter. Next is they need job security. And this is an area in the munitions industrial base, and it might be similar in other segments of the Army, but this is something that we have not had. History has shown that we deal with highs and lows, and sometimes those lows are well below minimum sustaining quantities. Very hard to have somebody or attract people to come working in your industry if the work is not there 2 or 3 years from now. So this has been an environment we've been working on for decades. I'm hoping, or industry is hoping, that this time we'll see a change. The current base budget right now is at pre-Ukraine levels, which we already know are well below what they should be. So we want to first see a step function change to the base munitions budget. Secondly, is we need to lean more on multi-year contracting. And Honorable Bush did mention or made some commentary on some great achievements. There was a directive to get to a certain point by the end of September. We haven't done multi-year contracting in the munitions industrial base since the 90s, so huge achievement to both ACC and the PEO's office, Herculean efforts to get to where they got, but it's still being treated as an exception. And I really do think it needs to be treated as the norm. There's a lot of benefits with multi-year contracting, very few cons, if any, and one of them would be giving our workforce the confidence that they will have a job 3 to 5 years down the road. The last thing I want to talk about is something that's very important to many of our engineers in the newer generation. They want to work in an industry that is innovative. They don't want to work in a company or an industry that's dealing with 20 years old technology. Army modernization, the priority, the communication has really helped us on this front. It's really helped us attract people into the industry. But I'll tell you, there was a concern right now going on in my company. I was with my engineering at an engineering summit, my engineering leaders and early in careers, and their biggest concern was everything going on in Ukraine right now. Is that going to divert attention or priority away from modernization? Is it going to take funding? Now, I know the answer to that because I am talking to Army leadership. So the good news is, no, it's not. It's just as important, if not more important now than it was before. But what's important is not what I say, but what Army leadership say and what they say jointly. So I really wanted to thank you, too, for the message you continue to deliver jointly on the importance of Army modernization, because it makes a difference, not just for the company to make investments, but also for our workforce. Thank you.
Great. Thanks to each of you for your insights. Before we open up to questions from the audience, I'd like to follow up a little bit on your remarks. For the Honorable Bush, I'd like to follow up on his question of the pace or speed of modernization and transformation. There still seems to be an attitude within the defense enterprise, and I include those outside of DoD, that the Army is too slow to modernize, and that's despite some of the successes that you just highlighted. Can you give us a sense of what they're missing or where they may be wrong?
Well, I think, first of all, the way you change a narrative like that is you just show you can do it. So, and I think that's why I was rattling off those success stories. We got to low rate production with M10 in 4 years. We're going to be in production with XM7, the new rifle, in just under 4 years. And then General Rainey and I are working on a new effort to get loitering munitions at scale across the Army even faster than that. So
Right.
I think really it's just showing we can do it. And then also the Ukraine work has shown how fast we can go. I think there is a tension in any system to acquire things between speed, but also, as I mentioned, being responsible with the people's money regarding testing, and we're not cutting corners on testing. We're going to give this equipment to young men and women who trust us with their lives. We're going to make sure it works. There is no compromise there. That does sometimes add time, but I think as long as we're clear-eyed about the risks we're taking, there's smarter ways to do that faster, but we're still going to do that well. And then the other sometimes limiting factor is, the Army's a big place. Even if we're producing equipment at a certain rate, the Army's got units that have to get this equipment. They have to be ready to receive it. And the Army's busy. It's not like they're sitting around the motor pools waiting for us to show up with new stuff. They're training, they're deploying, they're doing the business of the Army every day. So, the rearm effort that was started, I think when you were G3, General Rainey, I think that idea of making sure we're timing our modernization to fit the Army's larger needs is also a part of that story. So, sure, it can go faster sometimes. We're doing that, but we've shown we can do it really fast when we need to.
Okay. And in addition to speed, there's, of course, a question of capacity. And again, there are some who question the ability of the DoD and the industrial base to keep up with the challenges you see with a growing China and their increasingly large industrial base, continued Russian aggression, and of course, given the events in the Middle East, unforeseen challenges to our national security. What are your perspectives on that? And I would open the question up to our other panel members.
I can start, and then
Yeah.
and Farad can jump in and help. So first of all, I do have confidence in our defense industry. Why? Because the American way, frankly, of free people, free markets, free enterprise is better than anything our adversaries have. They may seem faster sometimes, they may seem more coordinated, but they don't have the innovation, they don't have the ingenuity, they will not beat us in this battle. So first of all, I have a rock-solid confidence that the way we do this is the right way and is proven in the past to provide the world's best weapons at scales that our adversaries can't match. And it does take time to ramp up production. One thing I'd mention on capacity is there is good thinking going on now about how much capacity we need for surge production. So we need healthy production lines, as Farad pointed out, for kind of between the conflicts, but we do need, I think, one lesson learned is a better way to work with industry in advance to set the stage for production ramp-ups at speed during a conflict or right before a conflict when we have to ramp up. But beyond that, I'm just talking about it.
Yeah.
Farad's actually doing it, so please.
Absolutely. So we'll go back to the artillery ramp-up that I mentioned before, going from 15,000 shots per month to 85,000 shots per month. So that is really being done. What would really be considered a 5-year time period from start to finish, we're going to be able to start that process within 2 and be done within 3 years. So we're absolutely matching the expectation of the requirements coming out. And that goes, again, all with the alignment and working with our customer, with creative acquisition, accelerated acquisition, getting the Army's support and maybe getting our supply chain to focus more on our needs. And we're having regular conversations of where are the bottlenecks in the future, how can we address those, what do we need to bring over stateside. So I believe when we work collectively together as a nation and industry, we can far advance that versus anybody else in the world. And if you just think about artillery, a lot of people are talking about artillery acceleration around the world, but the U.S. is doing it. Nobody is doing it at the rate and at the speed that the U.S. is doing it, and it's all because of the partnerships we have between industry and the Army.
Okay. I'm going to pull that string just a little bit more. Mark Kansian from CSIS was recently quoted saying that while the ramp up to, I think the number he was talking about was 100,000 rounds by 25, that was impressive, but the Ukrainians are shooting between 150 and 300 rounds a month, and he was concerned about the gap there. Do you see the ability to further ramp that up, or do we see the Ukrainians becoming more efficient in the use of artillery, or a combination of all three?
Well, first thing to keep in mind is we're not doing this alone. You know, this is the whole free world coming together really to support Ukraine. So we are, you know, I still think we're the #1 arsenal of democracy, but we have a lot of democracies with arsenals, and they're helping, and we're leveraging them. So in some cases, we're funding production in other countries with our allies to support Ukraine, and our allies are also ramping up their own production. Europe's effort in particular, what's been described, and they are laying the groundwork now to do their own similar production ramp up to us, is the right answer. And so if you carry that thought over to the Pacific, our allies there, for a potential situation with China, are also looking at scaling up. So we're doing great work with Australia to get them producing precision weapons in Australia and producing artillery shells like ours. We already do work with Japan. We're going to do more. We're starting initial conversations. You may have seen news about, you know, we are sourcing TNT now from India for our production of artillery shells. It's a partnership, not just with industry, but with our allies. And I think it's everybody pulling together will get Ukraine what it needs. And if Israel needs additional support as well, we're ready and standing by in the Army to help them.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question on this in this area, and then not to let General Rainey off the hook any longer, I'm going to pull him in. But we've obviously made a large investment from DoD, from the Army, and we are seeing progressively increasing speed of development. But has that triggered sufficient industry investment on the other end to further ramp up that speed of response?
Okay, I can start, and then, it'd be great if Roy could give his views. I just see how it comes from my side.
Certainly.
So it is a partnership. The government does need, in some cases, to lead with initial investment, and then industry can come in and do what they do best, which is leverage capital, work in the American business environment, and make the magic happen there. So I think, yes, industry is stepping up. I have many examples, both Bharat's company, but also lots of other industry partners in the room where they are coming with their own capital investments as well. So two of our, hopefully we get permission from Congress, multi-year contracts. One's for GMLRS and one's for PAC-3 Patriot missiles, both made by Lockheed. They have been investing as well, and these are not small numbers, they're investing. So they have been investing and they continue to, and it's got to be done together. But sometimes in cases like this, especially when it's a crash production effort, I'm good with the government leading. When we have more time, we can maybe share the cost a bit better. But right now in this circumstance, just because of speed, the government is laying down the big money first. But I am confident that industry will absolutely do their part.
Okay. Bharat?
Yes. So, it goes back to the initial commentary, which is when you're dealing with very erratic budgets and you don't have confidence what the future could look like, it's very hard to justify any investment. So if you're talking about specifically dollar investments for industry to chip up, you would need to have multi-year contracting and confidence for us to actually make those investments, and we'd be absolutely happy to do that. But putting just the dollar investments aside, there are a lot of other investments that go into ramping up capabilities. There's process know-how, there's intellectual property in certain cases. We're bringing new technologies to the house and so on. So even though maybe it's not a dollar figure, we're sharing the expense 50-50, but because of what we're bringing to the table, we're able to do it speed of war, fast. We're able to bring a new capability. We're able to make it cheaper than another alternative. So I wouldn't just hone in on a dollar investment. I don't think that's probably a accurate picture because it really is a partnership between the two. But just to reiterate, industry is delighted and happy to make investments. We would just need security to know that after those investments, there would be production coming forward.
If I could, one thing was mentioned is we've done actually 4 multi-year contracts related to artillery production this year. Mm-hmm. So those we already had authority from Congress to do, and we didn't wait. So I think that's a sign of how we're trying to send the signals that Bharat's talking about.
Just a quick follow-up. Are there other contracting innovations that have come out of this that people might be interested in?
Okay, contracting deep cut question. Right. Some people in the room will like this. All right, so yes. So last summer, my colleagues in Congress, members were asking, what can we do to help? And we brought them a tailored list of, they're not shortcuts, but they do provide us more flexibility in terms of just how we get on contract with Ukraine-specific dollars. And we have aggressively used those to go much faster than normal. We can do sole source contracts faster. We've got a presumption of public interest that helps. And we've got more flexibility with the kind of data we have to get. So those contract innovations, frankly, carried over as well from some of the work the Army did during COVID to do rapid contracting to support that effort. So yes, there have been really good things in contracting. I want to make them normal, not just an emergency authority. We've got to show Congress, how we did this responsibly. But I think we're going to have a really good case. So they get transparency to do oversight. We can go at the speed that's relative to what's needed, also a speed that's more relevant for American business, which moves just at a much faster pace than we do.
Okay, that's great.
Can I just add to
yeah,
that?
Please.
Because I want to give a specific example on that. So I asked the question recently to our PO's office, pre-Ukraine, what was the acquisition timeline from identification of need all the way through issuance of a contract? And it was about 2 years. And I'll give you an example of one specific project that we presented. We presented it in September of last year. We were under contract in November, in 2 months. And I don't believe if we didn't utilize the sole source JNA approval or the UCA process, we would still not be under contract. And because of that, we'll actually be producing bodies, projectile bodies for 155 artillery in less than 18 months after contract award. And one more thing I want to say on that, because of the dialogue that we had and the alignment, and we really understood the need, we did something that industry does not always do. We actually leaned forward, and we actually made the commitment at the time in September. So we even shaved more time off the months because we had the confidence that, yes, this is going forward and so on. So I wouldn't just underplay how significant that was from 2 years down to really zero from the conversation.
Yeah. No, that's very encouraging, actually. So to kind of shift gears a little bit, General Rainey, but I would offer the other members of the panel a chance to weigh in as you see fit. The conflict in Ukraine provides a renewed and compelling war laboratory. It may be as insightful as the 73 Arab-Israeli War, given what it meant to the Big Five airline battle in Division 86, which was a fundamental transformation of the Army in that era. Given the scale, the breadth and depth of the battlefield in Ukraine, the primary killers that range from landmines, at least in this phase, to rocket and cannon artillery, to UAVs, which make the battlefield increasingly transparent, but also lethal in their own right, but also as a means of more precisely directing artillery against the enemy. And of course, anti-tank guided missiles, Javelin being a premier example of that in that war, as well as tanks. The lethality of this battlefield appears to have reinforced some age-old challenges, such as if you can be seen, you can be hit and killed, and the primacy of combined, if not all arms operations. But they've also exposed some other challenges, such as the issue of, or advent of, prolific uncrewed systems being used, both air and mostly maritime in the fight, as well as cyber and EW. Can you provide the audience with a sense for how this conflict has shaped your thinking as it pertains to warfighting, and both how you see the Army of 2030, but perhaps more importantly, the Army of 2040, and what that means to S&T and some of the demands you may place on the acquisition system. And obviously, Mr. Secretary and Farad, if you have observations, please weigh in.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. The tragedy that's unfolding, in the Ukraine and, like I said, now in the Middle East in the last 72 hours, I think we have a moral responsibility to do everything we can to learn from that. I'm very proud of the Army. We actually had Army collection, lessons learned, collecting teams, General Beagle, General Brito, my teammates, before the Russians invaded, and have been there consistently since, collecting observations. The bar, I'm hesitant to use the word learned loosely. Learned means you saw something, you figured it out, you made a change, you institutionalized it. But we are absolutely observing some very unique things that are happening. Like I said, I think this is the most disruptive period in the character of war that we've experienced probably since at least before World War II. And it's even more complicated because you got to look at what's going on in the Ukraine, for example, figure out of that what is unique to the situation, the environment, the geography, what is probably changing the character of war, and then how do you take that change through the lens of our pacing challenge in the Indo-Pacific and adapt it or make it make sense in that fight or a larger fight in Europe. So it's an incredibly complex problem. Just a few comments. I always ask people, so my thinking, I always ask people, hey, let's start with what's not changing. Let's control for the known. It's a lot easier. So a couple quick ones. Indisputably, war remains about people, about human beings. It's a contest of wills. The biggest strength we have as the United States Army is our people, more than any piece of kit, technology, or anything else, right? All volunteer force fighting for their teammates and something they believe in. Non-commissioned officer corps, the envy of the world. We got better leaders and more of them than anybody we're gonna fight. And the things that the men and women that we put in command of formations can do, battalion, brigade, division, nobody we're gonna fight can do that. So we gotta make sure we preserve that. Another big one is land remains decisive. Okay, we're a joint force. We fight as a joint force. Anybody who says air and maritime theater, you're not really having a serious professional conversation with folks. They're joint theaters. But the land absolutely is decisive. It's where all the people are, it's where all the roads are, it's where all the resources are, and I believe the future is gonna remain about the land. And then another big one, a little deeper topic, but we're a values-based military. We fight in accordance with the law of armed conflict, and I don't believe, I'm certain that will not change. So when you look at what's going on, you have to put it through that filter, because those of us that have commanded in combat are not going to indiscriminately drop bombs and shoot rounds and turn things over to AI and cede the moral responsibility of fighting in accordance with the law of armed conflict over to machines, right? So those are all big things that are not gonna change. But that's not your question. So big changes, yeah, you hit on one. We are gonna be under constant observation and constant contact of some form at all times. Electromagnetic, space-based sensing. So you're gonna be seen and you're gonna be in contact. That is a big deal for folks that grew up thinking that maneuver warfare was about hiding and surprising and using IV lines and picking my formation based on when I'm going to be observed. It's not the end of the world, because while the enemy can see us, we don't have to concede that they're going to be able to understand what they're seeing. So I would offer that counter C5ISR is probably even more important than the actual ability to do C5ISR. I think there's a lot of offense and defense talk. I will tell you, defense has always been stronger, offense has always been decisive, but technology greatly favors the defense. So the defense is getting more and more lethal and stronger, and the offense is getting harder and more costly. And we need to look at that through a lens of our training and our, at least in the United States Army, our overwhelming bias for the offense, I think, is going to settle more into a 50-50 type split, the ability to build an integrated defense with some organic offensive capability. I'm not certain that we're going to face an enemy that could deal with a fully integrated joint force defense to deter enemy aggression. So I think there's a lot of potential there. We're going to fight in cities, not popular. Nobody wants to talk about it. Not attrition warfare to clear big giant cities, but we're going to have equipment and formations and leaders that can operate in urban areas if they have to for limited periods of time, and that has big impact on how we're modernizing. I'm an infantry officer by trade. It pains me to say this, but I believe we're going to go back to more maneuver to position fires than fire shaping maneuver. So those of you in uniform that fight, that's something we got to wrap our head around. You know, it's more in line with the way we fought historically, but over the last 20 years, we've settled into fire setting conditions for maneuver. I think given the lethality of fires and the moral responsibility, you know, the most valuable weapon system we have is and will always be the U.S. Army Rifle Squad, right? 9 men and women, that's the best we got. They work in the rain. They work without batteries. So that weapon system, but it is precious, right? We don't do attrition warfare. We can't trade 10, 20,000 casualties. So before we commit that force, we need to have exhausted every mechanism we have to destroy or defeat our enemy. But when we do commit them, they better be able to close that last 500 meters and destroy the enemy. So there's some big ones.
Okay, great, thank you. You mentioned our the pacing threat or challenge in China, and while not solely limited to China, I know you've just established a contested logistics cross-functional team, and of course logistics has always been contested by the inherent friction of war, but now you have anti-access and area denial strategies and capabilities that our adversaries are exhibiting, and of course the physics and geometry of the Pacific is a challenge all in itself. Can you give some insights from where the CFT is today and what they've learned in their early days?
Yeah, thank you. Logistics have always been contested. They're always hard. Sometimes we contest them ourselves inside the Army by not planning them well. We've kind of been blessed over the last couple decades, so we got a bunch of leaders that are used to things just showing up. A fight against a good enemy, especially China, because they have too big, and General Flynn is much more articulate about this, so I won't get into it, but they have two big advantages, mass and interior lines. So those two, by definition, are going to force us into a contested logistics problem if we were to fight an away game in the South China Sea, Korea, somewhere like that. So it's a big problem. It's solvable, but it's a big problem. So yeah, we're looking at that a lot of different ways. We did stand up a contested logistics CFT. Colonel Shane Upton right there is running it. If you have any hard questions, he'll be standing by later afterwards to answer them better than me. But and we put it down at Huntsville because Charles Hamilton, the AMC commander, has the strategic and operational level contested logistics problem. So Shane and his team, division and below, contested logistics. And the big things we're starting with is predictive logistics, right? Taking advantage of technology again. The things that are knowable about a formation, taking an armor brigade combat team. Right now, we're still sending digital or voice sit reps on fuel status, ammo. You know, any of us, most of us, not me, I drive a 97 F-150, but most of our cars tell us more about what's going on than our combat systems do. So we got to get better at that, because the one thing we can't afford to do is push logistics, go through all the trouble, and not get the right stuff in the right place at the right time. So there's a big opportunity in predictive logistics. And the one I'm really excited about is autonomous and robotic resupply. I think if you look at industry, go down to the Gulf, look at the oil industry, look at technology that's available in big factories, construction sites, et cetera, the farming industry and what they're doing. There's a big opportunity for us to get a lot better, a lot faster by leveraging smaller autonomous watercraft coupled with manned watercraft, obviously, in a formation context, alternative power, demand reduction. I'm not a logistician, I'm a simple fella, but a good way to attack the logistics problem is dramatically reduce the amount of stuff you're moving. So if you look at our light infantry formations, they're incredibly mobile right now. So the technology exists to increase the lethality and survivability. So instead of worried about moving an ABCT, let's take an IBCT and make it as lethal and survivable as an ABCT. Dramatically reduce your logistics challenges at the strategic, operational, and tactical level. At the same time, we're always going to need heavy brigades. I mean, the armor's not dead, much to the chagrin of some people. We are going to need armor brigade combat teams, right? Combination of tanks, Bradleys, and that precious rifle squad, but they're way too heavy, and their log tail is just not conducive to fighting in the places we're going to have to fight. So dropping the overall weight and log tail of our heavy formation, so demand reduction, all things relevant to that division and below is kind of where we're focused. We're off to a really good start.
Okay, great. Let me circle back to both the Secretary and yourself, General Rainey, and you talked about the defense and the trends in munitions capabilities strengthening the defense. So I would ask, what are the new munitions technologies or capabilities that are contributing to both Army modernization that you find most compelling? And do you think those are transformative, or are they just an evolution from what we have today?
So I'll make a couple observations in terms of their effect on the battlefield. I defer to General Rainey, but so one thing we are seeing in Ukraine is certainly, the mass precision at scale is real. It's happening. So as General Rainey said, the lethality of the battlefield is increasing, and the depth of that lethality overlay is also increasing. So I think that shows that the Army leaders that started our most recent round of modernization with focus on long-range fires capability is the number one thing. We're actually quite prescient, and we're now getting to actually field that stuff. So we're doing, we've already fielded our first operational battery of our mid-range capability with ground-launched Tomahawks and SM-6s. That's already in the field. More batteries coming soon. We are on an aggressive testing campaign to get a long-range hypersonic weapon fielded by the end of the calendar year, hopefully. And then below that, we have opportunities with not just longer range cannons, but also better munitions that can make those go even farther and be more precise and more autonomous when they get to the target. And then backing it all the way up, as I mentioned before, General Rainey worked on some recent requirements. We're working through how to get programs started for loitering munitions, for example, like some including ones like switchblades, 300 and 600, that type of weapon at scale across Army infantry formations to make them much more capable. So I think the munitions space, given the just continued miniaturization of electronics, our ability to make the weapons individually smarter with AI-like capability, and over time something more like true AI on the weapons, will enable us to compete and get ahead of our allies in this. In terms of the effect of all that and the thinking behind the requirements, defer to General Rainey.
Yeah, I'll start with long-range fires. Also, absolutely the right thing to do, on track, in a good place, not in competition with the joint force, but for a combatant commander to add land-based long-range precision fires to the suite of tools they have is going to be game-changing. I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages to all of them. Mobile, small, land-based long-range fired units that can hide in the population, they can hide in the electromagnetic spectrum, causes a whole nother problem for anybody we're going to fight. And because they shoot cross-domain and can bring effects from the land into the air and maritime domains, just like we can in the cyber domain and in space, is going to be a huge capability and present a gigantic dilemma to our enemy. At the same time, though, if you watch what's going on in Ukraine, the tactical fires still matter, both capability and capacity. So my answer is yes, I'm in favor of all things fires. Again, going back to being an infantryman, but to be more specific, start with mortars, right? We got extended range out of our 81. We should do the same thing out of 60s and 120s, the suite and capabilities of the ammo. So innovating on the round is much more cost effective and makes more sense than continuing to innovate on platform, right? You don't have to make a new platform to get extended range if you get a better round. So I think all things munitions, mortars, back to human machine integrated formations. The reason light infantry companies have 60 millimeter mortars is because they're man powered, right? You got to carry it. So the potential to dramatically upgun a light infantry formation by putting mortars on small robots that can take the weight, carry more rounds. So there's a lot of work there. Towed artillery doesn't look like a smart bet. You know, if your displacement time is in the minutes against a good enemy that can do what they can do from air loitering UAVs, I think we got to get more mobile in our, you know, we got to get out of the towed business and either get into robotic or wheeled fires, probably both. And then, like I said, continuing to work the range and weapon suite. You know, there's still going to be a need to blow up the far side of a river or rapidly suppress an area. You know, when a ground control station turns on, that's the time to stop that's the time to stop a UAV attack, not when they're on top of your tanks. And sometimes you're not going to have a 10-digit grid. You're just going to need to take down half a grid square. So ground-based rockets, ground-based missiles, launched effects off of robots, so you can extend your network, do counter, you know, non-lethal fires are going to start being almost indistinguishable. So you might have a loitering munition that can fly through a tank, but that same loitering munition should be able to jam, it should be able to do offensive EW, it should extend your network, et cetera. So a lot of it's all about opportunity. We just got to get faster at acquiring it.
Yeah. As a follow-up on the increased performance, I know that the OSCE has published an interject strategy. Mr. Secretary and Farhat, do you have any insights on that, where that's headed, what the opportunities may be?
Sure, I think this new strategy rightly points out that we need to do the R&D work to improve formulations both for explosives and propellants, kind of across the force. We have good things now. The stuff we're putting in our weapons right now absolutely work, tried and true. They work in combat, but you know, our adversaries are researching here, and we have to as well. And if there's new, better formulations that extend range, increase lethality in the same form factor, that would be especially intriguing. I think that's one of the things they want to work on. We're going to have to do R&D with industry, and then also work with industry to make investments perhaps in some of these might take new manufacturing techniques, but that's also exciting. So 3D printing a rocket motor perhaps, rather than the way we make a rocket motor now, could be a way to use some of those new formulations safely. So there's a lot going on there, but Farhat, please.
Yeah, no, I concur with everything there. It's getting the attention, which is great. I'll give you one success story. So the current round, M795, it goes 22 kilometers. It has a charge, what we call the max charge. So we've already demonstrated that with a larger charge in a different gun system, but it's really the new formulation of the propellant in the back and the size of it, that will take that over 70 kilometers. So that's tripling range right there. And then a lot more can be done on the explosive side and hopefully on the propellant rocket motor side as well.
Okay, great. And as we open up the mics to questions from the audience, Mr. Secretary, I have one last question for you.
Sure.
Given the inflation we've seen, which admittedly is coming down, how do you see the Army's buying power today and into the future?
So, I mean, I think, you know, the inflation we've had regarding, you know, manifests for us in terms of increased costs in some cases for materials and labor. You know, we're adapting to that. We're dealing with it contract by contract as it comes up. I think, though, that Congress will recognize that and adjust our budgets over time accordingly. Flexibility in how to adjust contracts when we do have increased costs in a short period is an important thing. industry, some great feedback from them on even when we have a fixed price contract, we need ways inside that contract to account for unexpected economic conditions. So we're not just asking the industry to completely eat all that increased cost. I mean, there needs to be ways to share risk, in other words. And I think we've started doing that. So I think across the board, smarter contracting will fix a lot of that problem. But then also, buying in quantity also and over years helps us get better prices even in an inflation environment. Multi-year contracts, one of the reasons you do them is to save money. And they absolutely do, because we're giving industry a 4 or 5 year demand signal, large quantities. So that's another way to get at dealing with potential individual cost growth situations.
Great, thank you. Again, for the audience, if you come up to the microphones here,
I hope it works. Okay.
We can't see you, but I guess you're out there. Yeah.
I cannot get it. Is it? Okay. My question has to do with the power source or power generation. There isn't much talk about that. I heard just one comment related to using alternative power. My company has been involved in fuel cell development for 20 years in the automotive industry. And we found a lot of resistance to change coming from the traditional engine manufacturers and now battery manufacturers. But fuel cells hold the greatest promise. When Russia was attacking Ukraine, the Russian tanks got stuck. They were out of fuel. With fuel cells, if we were to power tanks with fuel cells, and you have the fuel cells coupled with fuel reformers that separate the hydrogen on demand from today's fuels, and even fuels made on the base, any type of fuel, biofuel, and reverse the work with water. They become electrolyzers. I believe fuel cells constitute the future of power generation in propulsion, stationary power, portable power. They could lighten up the weight of the soldiers' backpacks by about 2/3. And I don't understand why are we encountering this type of resistance. There isn't much talk about it, but there should, because power generation is very important for the future of warfare.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think I can start, and I think this cuts directly to some of the work the General Rainey's team is doing at the CFT. So first of all, acknowledge the point that the way we power vehicles is changing fundamentally. The Army is recognizing that our two future ground combat platforms, the XM30, which will become the M30 and replace the Bradley, and our new M1E3 Abrams modernization effort, I'm quite confident are going to be hybrid electric vehicles to both use less fuel but also have power on the vehicles to do other things. However, this is the really critical work on the logistics side that has to happen, is we have to think differently about how to get energy, because you still need energy. It might not be fossil fuels as much, but you still need energy. How do you deliver that across the battlefield? And we're going to need to leverage all technologies, not just lithium-ion batteries perhaps, but also fuel cells. I've seen walking around last year, and this and other trade shows, some terrific things in the fuel cell and generator space. So I think the Army will eventually get there. We got to do the thinking first about how to do it, and then we will move out quickly. One last thing I'd mention before turning it to the general. The Army does sometimes have requirements that are different from the private sector. So something you see in the commercial world doesn't have to work at -50, or at 6,000 feet altitude all the time. The Army has to fight anywhere in the world. So sometimes that's where we need your help, industry. We need to take commercial tech, add that extra something to make it truly ruggedized and able to operate in all kinds of conditions. And then that's when we can go into production. But we want to work with you on those things. General.
Yeah, I don't know who's resisting you. It's not me. I'm a big fan, and we do have to get a lot better. And that's why it's one of the 4 priorities for the Contested Logistics CFT. And our team at DevCom across the Army is doing incredible work with batteries. real simple thing would be for DOD to standardize the number of batteries that we use to a manageable amount. You know, it would dramatically help if we had an industry standard where we could come out to you and say, you know, not every system can have a unique battery requirement. I know that's not exactly the question you asked. Hybrid engines are a great example of getting a better system and an efficiency, right? So the M1 tank, it burns gas sitting still. Like it's awesome, but you better gas that thing up every 8 hours, right? So if you switch to a hybrid, it gives you silent watch, so you're not burning gas when you're standing. If we're really good, we'll get to silent drive, which will give you the ability in some situations to move, you know, on a battlefield full of acoustic sensors. You know, tanks are also loud for a reason. So we have the potential to dramatically reduce the fuel consumption and end up with a better tank, and I'm really excited about that. And there's parallels all over the place. But having been in a tank in combat, there are times when you hit the gas, you want everything America's got to offer, right? Like there are times you're going to want to go. So I'm not going all the way down the battery path, but I'm a big fan of hybrid, for example.
Other questions?
So I produce something that has no cost for the Army. I produce engineers. I'm a professor of vertical lift at Georgia Tech. And so it was mentioned that workforce is important. Capacity was important. If we want to pump out stuff at scale, then we need more engineers. For vertical lift specifically, you mentioned, Secretary Bush, some accomplishments for like in the last year that the Army has accomplished. Many of them were vertical lift. FLRAA, other things. Some of the products are out there. Half of the drones is vertical lift, maybe more. There's the V280, right? So somebody got to produce that stuff. And we have an engineering shortage. It's already a shortage, and it will increase. General Rainey operates a program. It's a small program in your big portfolio. It's the VLRCO, Vertical Lift Research Centers of Excellence. It's a $3 million investment per year of the Army. It runs since 1982. So it's very successful, and it's a handful of universities, like 3 centers, and then a bunch of smaller across all states. And they produce most or the bulk of the engineers that go to Bell, Boeing, Sikorsky, Defense Industrial Base at large, and to the Army, FMIC, and so on, do research, evaluate products that the industry pumps out. So we're doing that. We're doing cost share 50-50. The universities are all in. In light of the shortage, so I do have more of a comment than a question, I guess. I do ask for money. So $3 million per year. It hasn't gone up. Not even inflation has.
Yep.
I think it's a super investment in light of the engineering crisis that that's in front of us. And I think I just want to bring it to your attention because it's such a small.
Thank you. I'm well aware of that, and that's not all the money we give Georgia Tech either. But the
there's a lot.
So Army Futures Command, through ARL, Army Research, we oversee the Army's outreach to universities, and we have meaningful partnerships with over 1,200 universities all over the place. But I agree with you. I've talked about our superpower in the United States Army. Our real true asymmetric advantage is our people, and investing in talent is absolutely essential, and I couldn't agree with you more. We have a whole lot of talented tech people in the civilian workforce, in the Army, in uniform, of all ranks. As I think about the Army of the future, we need to dramatically increase that. We need to make permanent career paths, because the great thing about young people is they're not looking for security and money as much as they're looking for doing something with a sense of purpose that matters, that they feel good about. And we're gonna have to fight for that talent. And I think there's no better place to come in and be challenged, do meaningful work, do something with your life that's bigger than just yourself. And we don't need you to do it forever. There's plenty of money to be made by everybody, but coming in and doing a little bit of that on behalf of your country and the Constitution is a compelling narrative, and I think we do well, and it starts with the universities. The other thing you didn't mention that I would offer is more valuable than money is the internship programs that every command has. Gary Brito, Charles Hamilton, AFC. We are out there fighting for young men and women to come work, spend a summer hanging out with the United States Army and get all fired up and go back and finish your degree, and then we'll have a job for you. Now, we need some help. It takes, just so you don't think I'm up here just unaware of some facts, it takes way too long to onboard and hire civilians, and people that are highly competitive, tech especially, are not going to want to figure out whether they're going to get paid or not every year. So we got some work to do to be more dependable and to be able to find some talent and put it in uniform and start paying it, or put it in a suit and start paying it a lot faster than we currently do. But thank you for that comment.
So I want to follow on with that a little bit. And while I respect the universities churning out new engineers, with the digital transformation, digital engineering, modeling, and simulation growth that we're seeing across our programs, and the support that Army Futures Command and the DevComs provide to the program offices, is there any thought being given to the upskilling of the engineers currently sitting in those commands to be able to take on those new digital engineering skills, modeling and simulation skills? I know traditionally the dollars that are available for that are coming from the programs as a percentage of that. But if we're surging into that new capability, is there going to be funding lines aligned to that specifically for workforce development at the DevComs?
So I can start. So it's not just an idea, it's happening. So my Principal Deputy Young Bang here in the front row has been leading this effort across ASALT certainly, and working in partnership with DevCom. Software in particular is an example. So it's not just enough for the Army, and we are radically changing how we do software to match the private sector. You have to have a workforce that can understand it and be a partner with industry. So upskilling the Army workforce in the area of software is a major ongoing initiative. Mr. Bang will be available after for detailed questions. But it has been recognized absolutely, because you can do a lot of PowerPoint, talk about the Army shifting its ways, but the only way to make it stick is to make the new, better way of doing things just the norm. And to do that, you have to educate and give your workforce the tools to succeed. So I think we do have efforts underway there. I'm open to ideas. That sounded like an inside plant question from the Army. If there are any comments for the FY26 budget bill, I'm all ears. But with all seriousness, about how we can better align funding to make it more executable for the folks in DevCom that General Rainey leads, and then also on my side in the PEOs.
My name is Abizer. I have a company called Shipcom AI, and we have about 22 AI use cases in the Air Force right now. And the idea about workforce development is that our platform is be focused on creating what I call 10,000 AI warriors at all levels of the echelon. My question, we are a Silicon Valley company, and our sister company is a Zero Trust cybersecurity company. And my question is that we do take so long, both in terms of procurement as well as deployment, as you know. Are we going to be ready on cybersecurity by 2027 around Zero Trust? And I did want to point that out. So thank you so much.
So I can't say I'm the Army's expert on all things cyber. We do have that expertise, though, across the force, and the Army CIO and the Army G6 and the other force in Army Cybercom, of course, work that every day, as you know. I can talk about a little bit about what we're trying to do to set conditions to be successful with AI. And there's two big ones. One is organizationally, and General Rainey's got a lot going on that I can let him talk about. But on my side of the fence, we're setting conditions at our Program Executive Office for Intelligence Systems to have a mechanism in place. It's called Project Linchpin, but what it is really building government capacity to understand AI and work with industry to evaluate it and field it quickly. So there's a government responsibility to understand what we're buying and what we're deploying especially with a new technology that's potentially so transformational. And the reason it's where it is in our Intel PEO is that we think that intelligence applications in particular are very ripe for AI to be kind of the first place in the Army we really take full advantage of what AI can offer. There's already work underway. There's already some programs doing that, but that's why we put it there. The second thing I'd mention is, to go back to workforce, is the part of the upskilling, and that's developing a cadre of people in the Army with private sector knowledge. For example, rotating acquisition officers through industry partnerships to AI companies to build our knowledge in the government and in the Army so we can work with industry at the right level. Those two processes are underway. We're certainly willing to go fast where we have a requirement, and this is going to be my transition to General Rainey. I think we're thinking through where that makes the most sense first, and then we can use, once we get a requirement, whatever acquisition thing we need to do at speed to make it happen quickly, to try to keep up with industry innovation in this area. General.
Yeah, great question and great answer. AI is one of the best examples of what I mean when I talk about the difference between modernizing and transforming. So when I think about AI or machine learning, largely, you can pick one of the emerging tech that are going to be game-changing, already are, but are really the potential to be incredibly disruptive. The leader development piece of that, and General Beagle's sitting over here, our great Combined Arms Center commander, but you know, we need leaders, the commanders who understand the capability and know how to leverage it. That's, you know, I believe the technology will figure that out, and just like we always do, we'll find the people to do it. But commanders who are as good at leveraging technology as they are as reading terrain and doing combined arms maneuver and understanding the enemy and leading and you know, so leader development, and then at every echelon of our professional military education, you know, what skills do we need to add? You know, what is every soldier in the Army has a basic responsibility to put on a protective mask and survive in a chemical environment. You know, what's the AI tech version of that? And what do we need our leaders to do? And what do we need to be teaching our great majors out at CGSC? And, you know, everything we do well in the Army is on the back of our non-commissioned officer corps. What do we need to integrate at echelon in our NCO professional education? But to your specific question, I may be on an island on this one. I think industry is always going to be better at and ahead of the Army and the military on AI. And I think as we design the command and control warfighting system of the future, that we need to get not one company, not vendor locked, but we need to get a handful of cutting edge companies integrated into that system as a service, doing AI, doing ML, and making sure that we are always one step ahead of the enemy and that we're being predictive. So that would be an example where I would not want to stand up a gigantic Army AI enterprise. The education, absolutely. And the stuff we're doing up at Carnegie Mellon is, I would put up against anybody and other great universities that we're using. So we need to train our leaders, we need to train our soldiers, but it would be a mistake for the Army to try and do AI better than companies in the United States that are really leading the world in that area. So it's more about the partnership and integration.
We have time for about one more question. Anybody?
I did have a follow-on.
Okay.
Quickly. Yeah. Sorry, since nobody was taking out. We are doing 90-day sprints, and AI is a shiny object right here. But if you look, I hang out with PEOs every day out in the field. And if you look at first principles, right, from data engineering to data science to then machine learning and AI, one is solving simple problems of contracting, overbilling, health of the shelf, health of the fleet, and then, of course, targeting and advanced command and control centers and C5 type stuff. So I'm just saying there's so much digital transformation available right now within normal stuff that the AI platforms can address on the data engineering side and then prepare ourselves for the future. I just wanted to say.
I'm with you. But getting to data centricity so you can actually leverage the full capability of AI is the difference between using it to do routine stuff you can already do faster to absolutely being able to leverage the potential of algorithmic warfare. But it starts with getting our data so that we're not trying to connect disparate systems together, that everybody is moving data to a place that every commander has tailorable access to. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I don't think the Army's going to figure that out. I think some great company, maybe yours, will figure that out. Call me if you do.
Yeah, that's one reason, for example, we're not establishing like a new PO to do AI. They all need to do it. So it's like we don't have a PO for lasers. So I think we want all of our POs to be able to speak that language, work with industry. We're open to ideas. I mean, we have requirements, but there's different ways to meet those requirements and provide better capability for General Rainey to be able to transform the Army. And where AI can fit, that's where we need that input from industry, because we, of course, don't have all the answers. We might come as a shock. We don't have all the answers, nor should we, really. We need that innovation I spoke of with the American people and American business. We need you to come to us with that. Help us learn. Thanks for your patience in advance. Sometimes we're a little slow, but we will get there. And if there's a compelling thing that helps soldiers, we're gonna do it. We're gonna get it done. But we need your help to understand what's possible.
All right. One last chance. Go ahead.
Hi.
You too? Okay, now we get two.
Over here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Given the things that you're talking about, the major capabilities that we're looking at, needing to deploy, revamp, there are existing contracts and existing infrastructures out there. What are the plans for ASALT and AFC in interfacing with those major programs to shift them in flight?
So you mean upgrades to what we already have, or?
Changes, modifications,
Sure.
to, like you were talking about, moving to a hybrid engine for the tanks. How are we going to take those major programs? What should industry be prepared for from a contracting standpoint to be able to rapidly respond to and give you what you're looking for?
So, sure. First of all, there is a little bit of tension between constant upgrades and the ability to sustain the fleet. So what we don't want in the Army is 900 different versions of the M1 tank. The Navy, I know when I was doing oversight, when I used to work for Congress, they had a lot of versions of V-22, very different ones, and it was a real struggle for them. I mean, they're making progress. So there's a tension between wanting to upgrade with the very latest, but also the sustainment part of just operating an Army unit where you got to have some standardization. But I think one way we want to get at that is more software upgrades than hardware upgrades. So as we design systems, we want them to be hardware that's going to last, a gun that's going to be good for a long time. But if there's a way to enable software upgrades, which you can do much faster, to give it a new capability, including perhaps an AI targeting system or something like that, that's really where we want to go. We are doing that on the radio side, for example. Software-defined radios are real, and they're here. Our ability, we hope, to be able to change waveforms quickly, for example, rather than having to buy all new radios is an example of that. But there's more coming there, and it's really the modular open system design we're trying to do with our new platforms, FLRAA and XM30 being the lead candidates. One idea behind that modular open system is plug-and-play major systems rather than having it's so tightly integrated it has to go back to the factory every time. So not there yet, but that's the idea, because what we've seen from industry is your ability to innovate faster than we can do upgrade programs. So we want to make it easier to upgrade and take advantage of all the innovation that's out in industry just to make our systems better. That'll require close partnership with the folks that own our requirements and decide what those platforms are going to do, but General Rainey's built a team and a system that's very nimble, and we can move quickly when we need to.
Last question.
General, apologies if my question derails your time. General, spoken a lot about technological improvements.
Yeah.
What are the doctrinal improvements you're making in line with that? And is technological improvement forcing doctrinal change, or is doctrinal change calling forward technological improvement?
Yeah, that's good. It's going to take me about an hour and a half to answer that question. That's a good question with 2 minutes left. So the United States Army is best when we lead with doctrine. So when we get doctrine first, and that drives the rest of the DOTML PFP, sorry for the acronym, but organization training material. So wherever we can, we aspire to do that. And we took multi-domain operations from a concept to doctrine about 2 years ago. Some of it was bringing to record things we were already doing, and some of it was putting markers down to do things forward. So unsatisfying answer. It's not as clean as doctrine leads tech. I think they're both. We're working very hard right now at Army Futures Command on the next Army warfighting concept, say, think 2030 to 2040, that period of time, and because that's the opportunity to get out and shape S&T and RDT&E and the second and third FIDAP. And there's some big opportunities there. So multi-domain operations, new doctrine for the Army within the last 24 months. And that's probably I would guess probably about a 5 to 7 year, that's going to drive change. You can't be whipping your doctrine a lot. And then you'll probably see a new concept experimented with that'll then turn into a new set of doctrine, probably just as we're entering in the next decade would be my guess. But it's both. You got to do both. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the audience, particularly the endurance of our standing room only crowd. Offer the panel final comments.
Just looking forward to continuing rapid progress we're making to modernize the Army, working with our Army partners and within the industry. When we stick to the plan and we can get things done, and we're getting it done for the Army, and we're going to continue to do that. But it doesn't happen with just acquisition people. It's we're part of a big system, and the teamwork is vital, and we have to be also good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, working with Congress to keep that understanding and support coming as well. So it all has to come together, but right now it is. So I just want to keep a good thing going and try to keep as much progress as we had in this past year, showing that next year when I'm back.
All right, great, thank you. Jim Rainey?
Just one more time, I've said it, I'm the Army Futures Command. Mr. Bush and I got full-time jobs, a lot of challenges. But I just bring it back that the United States Army, and I'd offer our like-minded partners, the rest of the Joint Force, the advantage we have is people. The next biggest advantage we have is that we do maneuver warfare. We don't do attrition warfare. We're not going to dig a trench and trade casualties and blood. We look at a problem, do all arms maneuver. People ask me all the time about tanks getting plinked, and if the United States Army tanks don't sit still by themselves, right? They fight with rifle squads, with fires, they maneuver. Back to my gas thing, they never sit still. So our people and combined arms maneuver, all arms maneuver, underpinned by just ruthless approach to training that we have in the United States Army at home station and the CTC. So even as the person responsible most, at least in uniform, for technology and modernization and transformation, the one thing I would never want anybody forget is that we got to absolutely preserve those two advantages: people and ruthless approach to training. Pay those bills first, preserve that like our life depends on it, because it does. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. What?
Yes, in closing, I really want to challenge the thought of these multi-year contracts. I think it's one thing we can do that could really help industry become stronger with really nothing to lose. Right now, they're done more as an exception. I'm going to quickly kind of walk through all the positives, hoping to get a lot of advocacy behind multi-year contracting. So for those of you that don't know, the basic rule is if you get a 10% savings, then you pursue multi-year contracting. That's kind of the basic rule, but that's extremely short-sighted in my mind for a couple of reasons. First of all, you're looking at the current contract. That's not enough. There's a follow-on contract. Let industry set up second sources, make investments that you're going to get the savings on the next contract. And not only that, you're going to get savings on other contracts because it's going to be part of our base. This is going to be renegotiated. You're going to get savings outside of that base contract. Putting cost savings aside, let's say it's all neutral. There's all these other benefits. We already talked about the workforce. We can give our workforce stability or sense of security for their jobs. Think about locking up supply chain. Right now, we're entering into annual contracts with supply chain. Well, there are constraints, worldwide constraints in some areas. With multi-year contracting, we can lock down key scarce resources through long-term agreements. We, industry, with a 5-year contract, can balance the workload. There are many instances where we'll have 2 years of production, 1 year down, then 2 years of production. If we had a 5-year contract, let us manage that period of time so we don't have a shutdown. The administrative time from the government, from the PEO's office, from ACC, working with industry, doing these annually, is not the best efficient way for us to spend our time. So I put all those pros on, I look at the cons, I don't see the cons. So my recommendation is, why not challenge the system or the practice, flip it over, and instead of letting justification be to enter into multi-year contracts, let that be the base contract. And I say all of this because we're going into now full rate production of all these new capabilities. Let's get it right from the start. You want industry's investments? You lose nothing by giving industry multi-year contracts. You actually get a stronger industrial base. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, I'd like to thank the panel from my perspective, and I'll hand the floor to Sergeant Major Elbert.
Thank you. Wasn't that a great CFT, Hua? Gentlemen, I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts. CMF, thank you. Transforming the future fight. On behalf of General Brown, AUSA's president and CEO, he'd like to present a token to each one of you. They're there at your tables. Hopefully you'll take them home and remember today's session. Also, on behalf of the staff, they want to say thanks. To those who are participating, I want to thank you for being here and being a part of this important discussion. We cannot do this alone. AUSA relies on its members to help tell the Army's story and to support our soldiers and their families. A strong membership base is vitally important for our advocacy efforts in Congress, the Pentagon, the Defense Industrial Base, and to the public and communities across the country through AUSA's 122 chapters within the United States and 9 countries. Thank you for your continued support of AUSA. If you're a new member of your professional association, and if you want to learn more about your benefits, or if you want to upgrade your membership from basic to premium, be sure to visit AUSA's membership booth located in the West Salon across from the registration, or visit ausa.org. This ends our forum. One more round of applause for our panel, and please continue to enjoy the meeting.